Morning. My name is Peter, and I was one of the disciples of Jesus and his friend. I want to thank you all for letting me come here this morning to share with you a little bit of the incredible things that I've seen, the incredible things he's done. You know, my name isn't actually Peter. It was Simon, son of John. But Jesus, he called me Peter, the one who he could depend on. But I want you to know the truth, because the truth is I let him down. I still remember the first time we saw him. We were all tending to our nets down by the water after a useless night. It was so frustrating. And suddenly this man arrives, Jesus, and he comes down. He's got a whole bunch of people that are following him, and they're all just trying to hear what he's saying. And he's trying to talk to them, but it was a large crowd. I mean, there was a lot of people. And so he saw us down by the shore, and he asked us, and we said yes, and he stepped into one of our boats, and we just pushed off a little bit from the shore, went out just a few meters. And he stood in the boat and he talked to the people. He was so easy to understand. He was so clear. It was amazing how clever he was with his words. And they kind of penetrated into the heart. And the people were amazed. We were amazed. Anyway, when he had finished talking with the people, he kind of sent them on their way, and they gradually began to disperse and head back into town, and we were left there. But he turns to us, and he tells us that we should go back out into the water. He says, head out into deeper water and put your nets back in. But you've got to understand, we were still in our boats from the night before, and we had spent the entire night fishing. And we caught nothing, not even a sardine. I'm not even going to tell you what my brother Andrew said when Jesus told us to go back out in the water. It was not good. But there was something in the way he asked us. We did what he asked. And we put the boats out. We went out into deeper water, and we threw our nets out. And immediately, our nets were so full, we couldn't handle them. We actually had to call the Zebedee brothers, James and John, to come and help us just to get the stuff back into the shore. And that was when he called us. He asked us to come with him, to follow him, telling us that he would make us fishers of men. It was incredible. I still remember the moment, because all of it, we left everything. We left our boats, we left our nets, we left our families, our lives, and we followed him. We saw incredible things. I got to tell you, they were incredible. There was this one time we're out on the lake, and this amazing storm comes on us. And when I say amazing storm, like, it was nuts. I spent my entire life on the water. I spent my entire life around boats, and I have never seen anything like this. It was insane. The waves were crashing. There was lightning. The wind it was like there was a hurricane, though that wouldn't have been possible. But it was just immense, and it was terrifying. And I don't mind telling you, I was frightened. I mean, we all were. We were frightened. And so we started taking whatever we could, and we were throwing the stuff overboard just to try and get a hold of the boat so we could manage it a little better. And in the middle of all the chaos, one of the guys, and I forget who it was, but one of the guys points out and shows that Jesus is in the front of the boat, and he's asleep. Can you imagine that? Here we are freaking out. Everybody's going to die, and Jesus is taking a nap. Oh my goodness, we were so thrown. So immediately we all start yelling, Jesus, Jesus, wake up. Master, Master, we're all going to drown. And he stood up, and he looked disappointed. I remember he said, we all heard him, he said, You of little faith, shaking his head. And he turns around and he didn't shout, he just spoke. Up into the storm, he just spoke the words. He said, "Peace, be still." And it ended. Immediately the wind stopped and the waves began to subside. And within seconds, the water was like glass. There was another time we were out in the middle of nowhere, and I mean, the middle of nowhere. I mean, there were no towns. There was not. Well, I don't know why we wound up there. We were just following around Jesus. And what was incredible is everywhere we had gone that day, more and more and more people. We traveled through a few towns, and suddenly we find ourselves in the middle of nothing, just fields and hillsides and rocks and stuff. And Jesus is teaching. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. But you should have seen the crowd. It was amazing. If I had to guess, I would say there was at least 5,000 men. And then on top of that, all the women and all the children. I mean, this was huge. And we were out there in the middle of nowhere listening to Jesus, learning all kinds of stuff. And after we'd been out there for a long time, I mean, hours had gone by, everybody started getting hungry, right? Go figure. Everybody starts getting hungry, and so we went to Jesus, and we said, "Jesus, we should let the people go so they can go to the town, so they can find something to eat." You know what he does? He turns to us, and he says, "You feed them." You feed them. You should. Judas, who looks after our money, he just about had a heart attack. You should have seen his face. It was incredible. We didn't have the money to feed all these people, and even if we did, we were in the middle of nowhere. There was nowhere to buy food. But we tried. I mean, we went around, we looked, we tried to find food from people. We talked to everybody we saw. We went around, and I mean, it took us quite a bit of time. But in the end, we came up empty-handed, and we stood there, and we were going to have to go tell Jesus. And just before I went to him, I felt a little tug at my cloak, and I turn around, and there's this boy. And the boy hands this package to me, and I'm like, "What is this?" And I open it up, and inside, you should have seen it. It was so cute. There's these 5 little loaves of bread. They were like these tiny little things. They were like half loaves. You know what I'm saying? They were like these little tiny loaves of bread. And a couple of these like wee little fish. And he's given this to us to feed people, right? It was cute. It was the lunch his mommy had packed for him. So I brought it I wanted Jesus to see that we had tried. And I brought it to Jesus. I was laughing when I gave it to him. But he didn't laugh. Instead, he turned and he smiled at the boy, and he lifted up the bread and he gave thanks, and he started to break it and hand it to us, telling us to take it to the people. And we're stunned. He just kept breaking it. And what was amazing is he broke it and broke it again, and he broke it again, and he broke it again, and he broke it again, and and it was, I've never seen anything like it. Again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. He broke it. And it was the same with the fish. He broke the fish, and he gave pieces of fish, and he's breaking the fish, and the fish kept breaking and breaking and breaking and breaking. And in the end, when we all were full, and all 5,000 men were full, and all of the women and all of the children were full, when we were all full, Jesus still had 12 baskets of food left. I still don't know what happened. We went with Jesus everywhere. Anywhere he walked, we went with him. It was absolute. We saw the most incredible things. With Jesus, the blind got their sight back. The deaf could hear again. The lame started walking. The sick were healed everywhere we went. Even the dead rose from the grave alive. It was amazing. He is amazing. But you know, he told me I would let him down. told me I would do it. It's like he knew. Before it ever happened, before I had done a thing, he knew. See, we were all sitting at the table. It was the Passover feast. We had gotten together. We were in this room upstairs from a friend of ours, and we were eating. We were just finishing up the meal, and Jesus took bread and he broke it. He liked to break bread, I think. But the weirdest thing happened. He broke the bread. He started handing pieces of bread to us, and he said the strangest thing. He said, "Take this and eat it. This is my body, broken for you." That's a strange thing to say, isn't it? It got even weirder, honestly. I mean, we did what we were told, right? But I mean, we did not understand. It got weirder afterwards when we were finished eating. He took a cup of wine and he held it up to us and he said, and this was just nuts. He said, I remember it so clear. He said, "This cup is the new covenant." That's our agreement, our commitment, our covenant with God. He said, "This is the new covenant in my blood. Whenever you eat the bread or drink from this cup, remember me." I mean, he's right there. What do you mean, remember me? I confess, we did not understand. We did not have a clue. But then he stood up and he said to all of us, he said, "I tell you the truth, all of you will let me down." And I was blown away. I mean, maybe these other guys, but I stood up and I said, "Lord, no. We will never let you down, especially not me. Maybe these other guys, but I will never let you down, not even if I have to face death." And Jesus looked at me and he had kind of a sad expression on his face as he said to me, "I tell you the truth, Peter. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. He knew. Later that night, we were in the garden, we were praying. We're in the garden, and suddenly this large mob showed up. There were soldiers, guards from the temple. They had swords. They had clubs. They had Judas, our Judas. In fact, Judas was leading them. I couldn't believe my eyes when they entered the garden. I had never imagined anything so vicious. And in fact, as we watched, Judas walks right up to Jesus and kisses him on the cheek, and you can see the guards nodding to one another like it was a sign they agreed on. I was so mad. I could have wrung that little twerp's neck. But there wasn't any time for that, because it was right there in that moment, as soon as he did that the guards grabbed him. And I tried to defend him. I drew my sword and I sliced off the ear of the high priest's servants. You should have seen his face. He was not expecting that. But before I could do anything else, Jesus stopped me. He told me that those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Those who choose violence will see it. And so the guards took him, and we scattered like rats. I tried to follow him. I kept a safe distance away, mind you, but I followed him, and I watched as they dragged him through a joke of a trial. It was full of lies and full of hate. It was miserable. It was awful. They were out to get him at any cost. They beat him, and they spat on him. And I stood there and I watched. But I mean, what could I do? What could I do? In the middle of it all, one of the servants' girls she sees me and she comes running up to me and she goes, you were also with Jesus of Nazareth. I saw you. And I'm like freaking out. I'm watching what they're doing to Jesus, and all I can think is what's going to happen to me. And I just blurt out to her. I said, no, I don't know him. You've got the wrong guy. And it was a bit of a chilly night, so I just moved away from her. I went over, I'm going to be warmed by the fire. So I moved over. But she followed me. I think her name was Karen. She just kept going at me. And she comes up to me. She goes, no, I've seen you with him. You're one of his disciples. And I was like, I told you, no, I'm not. But the another guy right there at the fire, this jerk, he turns to me and he goes, no, I've seen you with him. You are one of his disciples for sure. I've seen you. And I'm starting to panic at this point. And I just looked at everybody and I said, I am not one of his. And I looked over where Jesus was. And he was looking right at me. And it was right then in that moment. We all heard it. It was clear as day. It was the sound of the rooster crowing. And in that moment, I knew what I had done. He knew. They bruised him. They beat him with their fists and with clubs. They whipped him until they tore through the flesh in his back. They made a ring out of these horrible thorns and they forced it onto his head, calling it a crown. And then they made him carry this enormous cross all through the city, all through those streets, out of the city, out the gates, and then up onto the hill outside. You know the one. And then they nailed him to it and lifted him up for all to see. Above his head, they put a sign, and I read it. It said, "The King of the Jews." And they laughed at him. They spat on him. They mocked him. And while all of this was happening, you know what he was doing? He was praying to his Father, asking him to forgive all of them. He kept saying, they don't know what they're doing. I've never seen anything like it. After what seemed like forever, oh my goodness, he hung there for so long, just in pain, in agony. You could see it on him. And after what seemed like forever, we all heard him say, "It is finished." And as we watched, as he hung there, we heard him exhale his last breath. And Jesus died. He really did. He died. We all saw it. Some Roman guard even shoved a spear into his side just to make sure. But we could already see it. Jesus was dead. And they took his body down from the cross, and they took his body and they lay him in a tomb, and they sealed it with this massive stone seal with Roman seals upon it, posting guards, an impenetrable tomb. Jesus was dead. It was over. It was finished. That was the most painful day of our lives. But it's been more than 2,000 years since that day. And you must know by now that our sorrow only lasted 3 days. 3 days of mourning. 3 days of pain. 3 days not knowing. And then Sunday came.